Hello, everybody. Welcome back for today's episode 30 of the Ready Set Shag podcast. And today we're being joined by the multi-talented Eric July. He's a dynamic individual known for his role as the frontman of the band Backwordz, a content creator on YouTube, and a passionate political commentator. Eric is not just a voice in the music industry, but has also made a significant impact in the comic book world as of late with the Rippaverse, where he challenges the mainstream narrative and pushes back against the big two in comics. He's a libertarian thinker who brings a unique blend of entertainment and insightful commentary. And let's dive right into this conversation with Eric and explore his journey from music to comics. Mr. Eric July, how you doing, sir?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. I'm recovering from about like 5 days of the flu, I think.
It sucks.
Yeah,
It's never
it put
fun.
me on my ass to say the least. But
Never fun.
but no, thank you. I'm staying hydrated as you
Hey,
would
man, you got
recommend.
to. You absolutely got to.
Yep. And hit the gym today for the first time in 5 days, which was weird. I'm only about 85%, but I was like, I got to get in there. If I don't, I'm just going to set myself behind. So
Yeah, man. I feel you, man.
um,
That's what you got to do, man. You got to stay
yeah.
on top of it, man. You got to. Absolutely have to.
And honestly, a lot of thanks to you because I think watching you for years and hearing like the unapologetic, like, get your ass in the gym, get yourself in shape. Like, I think people need that nowadays. And some people might find it distracting or mean spirited or what. Like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, man? You think the world's missing a bit of the tough love, and
Oh,
you're there to
well,
give it to them?
yeah, I think that's part of it. Some people just don't want to be really honest with themselves and their individual situation. Do think just in general it is a cultural sort of problem, and I think it all stems back to the idea of accountability, right? And that is something that so many people kind of shy away from, especially when it comes to where you're at in life and look, my mindset with everything, even if there are external factors, I always look within if there's a shortcoming. And
Yep.
most people aren't wired that way. A lot of people are, and it's worked for me. Let me say that. But a lot of people are wired the opposite. It's shortcoming, everybody else's fault. And there's nothing that they did to attribute to anything. And that's it. That is a cultural thing. I think that you see that with how even young people and where they trend on economic issues and even mental health issues, right?
Mhm.
It really does speak to that, and it is something that if it hasn't already bit us in the tail, it'll happen soon enough. This is something that I think people need to take serious for sure.
Um, what was it that, like, for you, like, that started, like, what was it in your past that started you on this, like, be in the public eye? Like, there must have been something that, like, kinda clicked that was like, this is my calling, was meant to be out in front of things, talking about political issues, health issues, cultural, like, what was it for you that really kinda set everything in motion?
Well, I mean, look, I always been a speaker. I remember just when I was really, really young. I was young as I could remember being doing like Easter speeches and stuff like that for the church, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
it seemed even when I was very young that I was trending in a way that no matter what it was that I did, I was going to be in front of people talking about whatever. And being a musician really was, that's kind of what helped take everything off for me with a channel and how I learned about business, all that centered around music, right? So I recognized very early on that was going to be a thing, but it also was a lot of growth because it was a lot of the world that I still need to kind of figure out in my placement. We came and I came up during an era where definitely with technology was just rapidly changing.
Mm.
And I was always trying to stay ahead of it, especially with what we were doing in like on the metal scene because things were becoming more outdated. How people traditionally put out music was starting to just fundamentally shift. And I always tried to stay ahead of it. And there was a lot to learn about navigating just especially business. So I had a lot to learn, and I did learn along the way. Some in mistakes, other in successes, but it was an experience. But it was something that I did recognize early on for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it shows in a lot of different parts of everything you do, man. You're not afraid to put yourself out there, put yourself on the line. And I think it says a lot about your character and about the companies you run and the circles you fly in and all that. It's never easy. People think that being the head of something, you're nodding your head at everything and it's all cakewalk. And I would argue that you have the hardest job. A lot of the criticisms levied against you is that it's easy to write checks, and I think I've spoken up on your behalf and said it might be the hardest thing you have to do, because every check you write is a possible failure, and it could be money that you just tanked. So if that money's not going to the right place, I guess, like, what is your advice for people speaking out in this manner? Like, how do you learn these hard lessons of, like, understanding, like, how important your role is in your company and how detrimental it can be if it goes uninformed, these decisions?
Yeah, man. I've said this before. With the start of the Rippaverse, I have worked harder than I ever have in my entire life. And
Mhm.
I'm in general a workhorse. I work every single day. There's not a day that goes by where I work in some capacity. However, I've never worked as hard as I do right now because that's what's required of me.
Right.
And to your point, like when you are a owner of a business, especially one that has the revenue that we bring in, and also has the responsibilities with contractors and employees, and this is all stuff that we're having to ponder on. And to your point, we don't have any investors. We don't have any, there's none of that. So we have to be very careful with how we spend our money and with things that I green light, you know, there's going to be a lot of risk involved. I mean, the company started with a massive risk of me taking my own hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this bad boy off of the ground.
Right.
So yeah, I get it. For some people, they'll never be in that position, right? So they can't really, it's hard to fathom, it's hard to understand, especially if your idea of being a CEO or something like that is just this uber corporate disconnect, right? And that's
Yeah.
not what this business is. I'm very much involved in everything. And yes, part of actually the work is setting your employees that you have entrusted with whatever position that they're in. You got to set them up for success. They're going to look, definitely when they're first getting going, they're going to look to you for guidance, and you got to be able to, again, to me, that's what makes a good leader, right? It's
Right.
it's not just telling people what it is to do. It is by leading by example and being able to set people up for greatness, set people up for success. And there's a lot of work that's required
Mhm.
in that. So yeah, I get it. A lot of people's idea of a CEO or a business owner is TV and hey, it's this fat cat sitting in some high rise building and he doesn't do anything. Even
Yeah.
though that's not ever been my experience, even when I was working in like the corporate business. And I remember I worked out of the same office as our FO, CTO, as well as our CEO. And those guys were always working. Like they weren't never. I think some misconceptions with that. Anyway, but especially with something like this, where there's no shareholders, there's no investors with capital, and the buck really does stop with whatever it is that I'm doing. It's a lot of work that comes with that. A lot of just a lot. I mean, you remember when I first started off this company, I was working 6 days, sometimes seven, right?
Mhm.
In the warehouse,
Yeah.
right? Because I was our shipper. I was our second shipper
Yeah.
during that whole entire period of time with ISOM number one.
Yeah.
So that was what was required of me, and the same thing happened with ISOM too. Though it wasn't as much, I'm the owner of the company, and I want people, definitely in our warehouse staff, to understand that my warehouse manager, as well as my operations, they will never ask of them something that the owner of the company would not do. So they
Right.
see me in there packing the hell out of the boxes, and I think that's why that actually is partially why we don't have much turnover here, and the people that are here, they actually want to be in here. They enjoy their jobs,
Right.
and they get to see the owner actually at work. And I pride myself in that. It is my company at the end of the day, so I should be the hardest worker here. That's how I feel about it.
Heck yeah. I had asked, talked with Andrew a couple weeks ago. I think I asked him a similar question, but I figured your answer would be different, being the one that like set the original milestone. Your original goal of 300,000 in ISOM one. At what point did you did you go, oh shit, this is a lot worse, not like worse, but better than I anticipated? At what point did it all become like a fever dream to you?
Oh man, it was that first day, right? Like we had all those website issues, and then going into that 30th hour, even with the warehouse, excuse me, with the website issues, we were hitting $1 million. So things changed almost immediately. Like then, I think people need to understand that what all information we were processing there. We went from hey, I was not really anticipating that we were going to make a lot of money initially.
Right.
I thought it was going to be, hey, it's going to be a more gradual thing.
Yeah.
It was a risk, took it, be a little more gradual thing, and that just went away immediately. This was now, hey, you're in charge of a company that is worth $1 million at minimum, and then it became worth multiple millions of dollars very quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to process all of that information, and you don't really have a whole lot of time to celebrate.
Yeah.
It's more of, oh man, this is awesome, and it's like, oh crap, this is awesome. I now have to account for way higher numbers than what I originally anticipated.
Mhm.
So I went out there and turned a lot of my part-time guys to full-time guys. There were roles that I needed to fill. I went and reached out to people, brought them on, and we were having to build our staff up. And there was other logistical stuff that we had to deal with because again, it changes. It goes from, hey, I get a couple of thousand orders out, may have a couple of thousand customers to tens of thousands of customers. And that volume changes so much. You're not just operating anymore outside of, we had a little smaller warehouse and we could just get things done there. That wasn't good enough. We found that out pretty early on. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work in processing that information. And I just really want to give a big shout out to my team for, kind of rolling with the punches along with myself, because we were all learning a lot along the way about our capabilities and what it is that we were going to be able to do. So big shout out to them, because it was hell on earth and we got through it. We really did.
Yeah, and it seems like you're able to squash a lot of the issues in the second ISOM campaign, and keep the website up and moving. So on top of, I mean, the sales weren't as big for ISOM 2, but you were still able to make progress on the back end of things and iterate your processes to scale to those. I mean, still multi-million, I mean, you're over $1 million. And you needed to figure out, okay, what does this need to look like in order to hold all this?
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, because a lot of companies don't make the corrections needed and they flounder and they still have issues. Now there was a little issues with the
Yeah, it was a
second one,
couple
but not.
hiccups. Yeah. Yeah. Doing ISOM too, you're referring to. Absolutely. There
Mhm.
was a couple of things that we were still trying to deal with. And it was always learning. We took information from one campaign, got better, and then now we're at Alpha Core. And it is the best campaign in terms of like efficiency that we've had thus far. Website didn't crash. We the warehouse staff is fully staffed. I'm not needing to be there every single day doing that. I can focus on growing the company.
Yep.
All of that. So it was I mean, I'm really, again, I can't say enough, just big shout out to the team. I'm so extremely happy for them. But it's like what we did realize pretty quickly was that with the addition of each campaign meant more work, not just with like a launch, because we never stopped selling those items. right? So it's like,
Yeah.
hey, we still are selling ISOM 1. We're still selling ISOM 2 with Alpha Core's release. So you have a catalog that's growing of purchasing of items that are purchased, and that does come with its set of challenges. So now we're to the point to where, campaigns ended, orders don't stop. They're still going out. There's still hundreds of orders that are going out every day
Yeah.
because new people are finding out about it. So it's a nonstop grind. And what I wanted to make sure that we did was learn from each and everything that we came across that was a challenge, and come up with more efficient processes, which is why I'm so I'm grateful, obviously, in the success of Alpha Core, but I'm really, really proud of the team that we have internally, because from the website on up to the actual warehouse, it went about as smooth as a campaign at Massive could go.
Yeah. What is your for someone who's starting a multi, superhero universe? I mean, it's no small order to do such a thing. What is your biggest fear of starting it? Like, you guys, you've had good success with ISOM and ISOM 2. Alpha Core has been great. You got Chuck Dixon on, Saska Sisters, like what is there anything you're in fear of in starting this that like you think about constantly?
It was less fear and more there's uncertainty. I'll give you two things actually. First, the uncertainty,
Yeah.
especially with Alpha Core, because that was the first non ISOM property,
Yeah.
right? So we know ISOM's proven after ISOM 2. But this is a new property. It's a change of pace, different writer. Chuck's talked about this a lot of different times about how, hey, you come into this new company, you're a long time writer. That doesn't mean that just everybody's just going to get on board automatically. So
Yeah.
we had the first non-ISOM property, complete change of pace with the type of story it is that we're telling. This wasn't like a foot part of an arc.
Yeah.
This was a new team. The stories wrote in a very much in the form of like this police procedural. So it's just a different animal altogether, top to bottom, different animal. And
Yeah.
there was some uncertainty that came with that. But the other thing is, you know, and it still was a challenge. I mean, it still is a challenge to this day, is getting people to understand the long game, if that makes sense. Because there's different aspirations, especially in the independent scene. Some people have aspirations, they have a property, they'll put out a book every now and then, and that's really their aspirations. And with ours, it's like, look, no, I'm trying to grow this ever expanding sort of universe, and that's going to come with a lot of different books, a lot of properties, and also just a massive media company. So we talked about it a little bit before the show about, like, the challenge of being a creator now, where you have people with, like, not people with, well, I guess you could say that, a short attention spans. Everything is
Yeah.
like having to be limited, because that's where all the content is geared. Oh, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. Okay.
Right.
But either way it is, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And we're having to adjust to it. So trying to get people to understand, like, hey, this isn't about just ISOM. It's not the ISOM verse. This isn't even as far as ISOM story. I can't think of it through the lens, or look at it through the lens of year one. I have, or two or three. I have to look at it like 10 years, 20 years down the line. And the writing has to be taking that into consideration.
Yeah.
And I figured that a lot of people, especially with the growth of manga, would at least understand that, because they tell stories, often with the long game sort of in mind.
Yeah.
But a lot of the American stuff is trending the opposite way. So trying to get people to sort of understand that was another uncertainty, and for the most part, people are on board with it. But yeah, I would say that those two things are, like, definitely dealing with non-ISOM properties after we struck it big, and also just the ever expanding universe, and trying to get people to see, like, hey, we have to, as we're writing, we have to consider 5-10 years from now,
Yeah.
30 years from now, for that matter. I mean, you think about, like, my age, Spider-Man and all that stuff, that was 30 years in by the time I got it. Like, I
Yeah.
got to it in the 90s, right? That was 30 years. You go to Batman, it's even more so. You're talking 60 years, 60, 50, 60 years before we had ever got to it, like in terms of my lifetime. So that's a long time, right? And some people are going to look at you and compare you and your property to that. And it's like, well, they've been around for way longer than I have. I can't possibly have all that information available to you in year 1, 2, or 3. So at least it worked out. I will say that I think our transparency helps with that, and our audience understands that we're here to play the long game with the type of stories it is that we're telling here.
Yeah, no, it's one thing that I find fascinating about this, and I think it's really hard to like levy a lot of criticism against the Rippaverse, because like you would need, if you want to compare it to the big two, well, you need about 30, 40, 50 years, because that's the amount of storytelling that's been done versus what you guys have done. And like me personally, my very favorite part of all of this so far is Gooding. Like I want so much more of Gooding. And like, and that's just because like I like his swagger. I like how he carries himself in the comic. And then like I want to know what this. There's so much mystery surrounding this dude. What does he do? I will be honest. I haven't gotten to Alpha Core yet. The holidays like ran me dry. My kids drove me nuts.
Man, ain't nothing wrong with that.
But Gooding is like is where I'm at. I like how Alpha Core and Yaira were woven into ISOM. And really the slow burn of it all is something that I've said is really good for this, because while there's questions and questions, we're not into the questions of how I can't even think of the guy's name. J.J. Abrams does questions where there's just no
box stuff. Yeah,
right. There's none of that. It's
right.
For everything that there's questions, there's some answers, and then it's kind of pulling you through. And Yaira's appearance in ISOM 2, that little brief little thing we get in the parking garage, like that was sweet, man. Like I think you had said something about it, and I was like, dude, no, what people were. That was the first thing I noticed.
A lot of people missed it. Yeah. A lot of people missed that part of it. I was like, hey, go reread it again. And I was like, oh, snap, that actually happened. But to your point, yeah, that's kind of part of the slower burn of it all, and what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. These characters are very much themselves, right? And look, as I'm building the Rippaverse, as we are, me and myself, the writers that are involved, the Saskas, Chuck, Mike, we're building out this universe, and I understand that there are going to be characters that people gravitate toward, that they like. Okay. And like you say, Gooding, there's a lot of people that like that. Like I'm ready for that. We know we're sitting on this mammoth back here in Yaira, and that being the next book. And like that's the point to me. Like the point is a little something for everybody, and these characters can very much hold their own as far as the stories it is that we are telling. ISOM had to do what really none of these other books had to do, and that was launch a universe. Okay, so it was, so there was at least a starting point. It was, I had to consider Yaira, I had to consider that introduction, I had to consider Alpha Core, and we didn't want to make it to be pointless as well. So that's the reason why Yaira runs into ISOM in the first place, is because this whole deal that's happening with Alpha Core, right? So the worlds kind of collide there. And however, you go read a Gooding, you go read a Yaira, and it's very much their story. That's theirs. It's not ISOM's story. It's Yaira's story. It's Gooding's story. It's their stories, and that's our approach. So there's going to be something for everybody. I do believe that. We haven't even, hit the tip of the iceberg, man. Like this, we got so much planned with the different type of genres it is that we're going to be exploring. But in order for us to not write ourselves in the corner, we can't think like, hey, I'm trying to build the most epic, dramatic story right now. Yeah, I guess I technically could have done that. And then I would have wrote myself in a corner. And I don't want to ever, that wasn't the point. It's like, okay, you're going to, it's going to be a gradual kind of thing. And you are really going to learn about these characters. And the benefit that we have that, let's say, the big two, they don't have, is that we're considering that from the get-go instead of having to deal with the success later, which is what they had to deal with. I mean, you can't imagine that you guys create Batman and now it's going to be part of American culture. You think they thought that? No, of course that. They had no idea that it was going to blow up like that. When Stan Lee and Spider-Man pop off, was that like 64? You think they're well, that was X-Men. I think I think X-Men was 63. I think I might be Spider-Man might be, I can't remember. But either way, early 60s, we know that much. And you think they're thinking like, yeah, this right here is going to end up being a character that transcends comics. It is going to be very much a part of American culture.
Right.
So it's hard to tell stories with that type of thing in mind. However, with our technology that we have access to that they didn't, right? Like the Rippaverse happens because we're in this newer age where it's allowed to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
The technology allows us to do that. I can go directly to my customers. These are things that just weren't a thing back then. So we have to consider, and we should be considering, well, what if this does end up being a thing that's around for the next 30 years? Well, we need to write as if that's going to be the case. Even if it might not be, we need to write as if that is going to be the case. So that's kind of our approach there.
Right. So, I mean, that's it too. Like a lot of these stories, like you have ideas in your head, but if a character, just for the sake of argument, say Gooding takes off with people more than Isom and more than Yaira, let's just say, do you shift efforts over to Gooding and build that out more than you had, or do you stick with your original plans of doing things the way you want to do them? Are you going to let what the audience feels is the better story kind of guide you a little bit, or are you
It's
going
a
to
little bit of both. I mean, you have to take that feedback and do something with it. I mean, that's the only reason why Gooding got a book in the first place. Gooding was a character that nobody knew anything about. But it was about as organic as it possibly could be. Nobody knew anything about Gooding when we first when we put out Isom 2. You saw his name on the front, but that was it. You didn't know, but until everybody got the book, they didn't know anything about it. It wasn't like with a Yaira or Bloodroot where we had stuff available and you saw them prior to the actually getting a physical book. Gooding was just, you had to read the book to know who this character was, and he resonated. So that's why I immediately said, okay, we're going to give him his one shot. And, or we discussed that, myself and Mike, obviously getting Mike involved in the first place. And here it is. So it's a little bit of both. It's like, yeah, we have our ideas that we want to make sure that we entertain. But if the audience is demanding that they want more of a character, then they get more of the character. That's just the bottom line. There's no, we'd be stupid to follow any sort of other plan. We are very much a customer-driven company. So if that's what they demand, that's what it is that they're going to do, which is why I'm always telling people, don't look at it like, it's a reason why it's not called the Isom verse, right? It is called the Rippaverse, meaning that whoever is where people are gravitating towards, that's fine. And it's no problem if one character sells less or has less of a following. It doesn't mean that they can't be successful. When Spider-Man, any day of the week, Amazing Spider-Man is going to outsell whatever Punisher book is out. That doesn't mean that people don't like Punisher. That doesn't mean that there is an audience that you stop doing Punisher books altogether. No, it just means that this character just happens to be more or less popular than the other. So that's very much our approach. I love that feedback when I see people start gravitating towards a character. That's how we knew that Yaira was automatic. If there is a campaign that could outclass Isom, it'll be hers. Like that's where the greatest of the demand is, and there's no problem with that. However, inevitably speaking, somebody might be like, well, I like Isom, it's more grounded, or it's less superhero stuff with Gooding because he's not super powered. I'm gonna gravitate towards that. That's fine. There's no love loss if somebody prefers one or the other. That's the point of it having this this big universe it is that we're going to be inevitably expand upon. And who knows, maybe there's a character that I create next year or Chuck creates next year that's more popular than all of them. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We roll with the punches.
Do you think that's where a lot of the criticisms are coming from is because like you want people to enjoy the universe as a whole and be like, hey, there's a lot of characters out there that are going to pop up that people are going to like or dislike. It seems in it to me, it seems like a lot of the detractors are like they're making one character. So it's
Yeah.
like you have to like this, otherwise I'm out of a job. Where you're just like, well, I'm writing multiple people in this one universe. So you can like this one and not like that one and then love this one and hate that one. That's the
Yeah.
whole point, like
Absolutely, and that's what yeah, I do agree with that 100%. It's like with the whole ISOM bit. It's like there are some people that are under the impression like that's the central character, and it's like there is no central character. He's just the most popular one right now because we started it out that way, but we haven't even entered into 2 years existing as a company, right? Like which is kind of hard to believe. We're only a year and a half in to this whole thing, so Isom is just a character that we utilize to launch this entire universe. But Isom 1 is Isom's, that's his story. Isom 2 is Isom's story. Isom 3 will inevitably be Isom's story. So if someone prefers something else, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's no love lost from us. Like when some people are like, "Hey man, I prefer Alpha Core over Isom." Cool. Ain't nothing
right,
wrong with that. Like that's fine. That's fine with me. I mean, it is what it is. There's
right.
no issues there. So yeah, it's very much, I think, and I get it, right? Oftentimes, especially with independent stuff, that scope isn't there. Like it's usually individual properties, and people are developing individual properties, and that's it. So I don't knock anybody for assuming that like that's not our approach. But yeah, we are very much. I would argue our biggest selling point is those that are wanting to get ground level into a universe that has tons of characters that are going to be introduced over the years and will have inevitably something for them, something that they're going to like. And to your point, there may be other things that they dislike, whatever it is. That's what it's about for us. Find something, gravitate towards what you like. We're just getting started. But if you like a character, if you like a title more than another one, ain't nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all.
How is it approaching, these like some of these industry titans to come and work for you? Like, was it something you just were like, oh, this is just as natural as going to knock on my neighbor for some sugar? Like how was it for you to approach these guys and say, hey, I have this idea. I want you to be a part of it.
Well, for Chuck, it was for sure a conversation. So I'll start there. Chuck and Saskas, right?
Yeah.
So for us, it was like, yeah, I needed to surround myself with absolute veterans because I not just to flesh out the universe, but from which I could learn from. And Chuck Dixon is Chuck Dixon. The fact that he is even a free agent or was a free agent was stupid. I'm gonna be completely honest. It made no sense whatsoever, but he was. And I gained a lot from that. So my conversation is, yeah, it's a lot easier to have those conversations after making almost $4 million, right? It's just be honest. It's a lot easier to have those conversations because you can at least sell people on, hey, there's a draw here. Please be a part of it. But yeah, my conversations with Chuck and the Saskas was very much like, hey, I love what it is that you guys do. I want you to be a part of this, and I have a spot for you here at the Rippaverse. You're going to get beneficial contracts. You're also going to be able to have some level of, yeah, there's continuity and all that stuff that we need to worry about. But because of where we're at, you're going to have some semblance of like creative freedom to be able to tell stories that you want to tell, that you think makes the most sense for the audience. And also, again, wanted to set them up for success. Chuck knows team dynamics. He does that very, very well, and has historically, like stuff that he's done with all of the Bat family members. That's why Alpha Core made the most sense. When you know Saska's in their like track record, Yaira was a no brainer. That was a slam dunk. It was a slam dunk. It was like y'all have to do it. So thankfully they are part of it, and their involvement just grew naturally. It was like, well, now they're just like actually part of the team where everybody's actively coming up with new stories. Joe Bennett and Chuck are always coming up with ideas. Those are the type of creatives that I want, right? Is these guys, it's not just a contract, it's not just a commission for them. These guys are like in it to win it. They take this thing very seriously. Mike was a little different though. Mike was, I remember being on stream and Mike was like, "Hey man, I want to do something with the Rippaverse." He tried to. I had no conversation with him prior to that. He just flat out dropped that bomb while we were streaming about his own stuff, right?
Wow.
And he just said to everybody that was, I found out about it. Y'all can go watch that stream. I found about it the way y'all found out about it, and that was just me having that conversation with him via stream. And he was like, I want to be a part of this thing. So that's what happened to them. But yeah, make no mistake, I'm totally aware. I'm the spring chicken of all the people that are involved, right? The younger, the baby of the bunch, right? So
Yeah.
I need to surround myself with people that know what it is that they're doing, can assist when needed, and also I can learn a lot from. And I've learned a lot from all three of the people that I've mentioned. It's like a lot, like a significant amount
Yeah.
with storytelling, and I'm growing as a writer, and that's what you want. It's a constant growth, constant improvement thing, and you got to have those veterans. You got to mix them in. It's like it's like sports, right? You need that young talent mixed in with the guys that know what it is that they're doing, and that teamwork sort of makes the dream work.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how ISOM being it's your baby, it's your like your foray into comic writing, if I understand correctly. How has working with Chuck and Mike and the Saskas, how has that helped develop ISOM over number 1 to 2 and now 2 to 3?
Oh, it was instrumental, man. Like, yes, I had my ideas. I had an idea where I was going with the story. But once you start picking the brains of these, I mean, incredible writers that you mentioned, you start picking up on tips. And sometimes it's not necessarily like changing the story, it's how you tell it, right? I tell the story all the time because it's one of the best examples of Chuck making me better. And this isn't really this isn't ISOM, but this is some other stuff it is that we're working on. And I laid out this sort of this story that we're collaborating on. I laid this whole deal out, and there was one part of it, and he's like, "Yeah, all right, I got it. Everything's good. This makes sense, but there's this one part here, and I can't make sense of it, and here's why." And he explained it to me, and he offered an alternative, and obviously it was a much better alternative because it's Chuck Dixon.
Right.
But it wasn't just one of those things, "Hey, this idea is stupid, I hate it." It was no, it was, "Hey, I can't make sense of it, and because of that, it's going to be hard for us to tell a story where we make sense of it, and the audiences are going to be able to make sense of it. Why don't we go about it this way?" So you get the what's the issue, you get why it's the problem, and then you get why the solution is the better option, or why the alternative is a better option. And there was some fundamental thing as part of that story. And once the once that project ends up getting like announced and put out, I can tell it in more detail. But that was just like one of the first big examples of Chuck's presence just being felt within the company and my individual growth. So it's so necessary. He's been instrumental. And I mean, look, I'm living a dream to be able to have a guy like that, one of the most prolific writers of all time, that's in your corner, where you can ask him questions, where you can make sense of certain things. Look, man, you can't put a price on that. It's just it's so instrumental. It's just something that I'm going to be so thankful for years to come, for sure.
Yeah, I think that was the other, you know, I don't know if you know or not, but about 10 weeks ago, I sat down with one of your biggest detractors, Vito, and we spoke about stuff. And because I look at everything from the outside in. Sheep Sidian is one of my co-hosts on the Midweek Hump, so I speak with him occasionally on stuff. But like, I'm really on the outs. Like, I'm not involved in anything directly.
Right, right,
But
right.
I watch how people react to this stuff, and the criticisms of you being a new writer and this and that and leading with ISOM. I'm like, well, you know, what I look at when I'm looking at material, when I'm looking at like, is the story compelling? Is the story keeping me moving? Yes, it is. Okay. Am I seeing improvements from book to book? Yes, I'm seeing this. Am I going to see it over time? Because I have to say, part of running a good business is putting the right people in the right spots. We kind of
Absolutely.
said early.
Absolutely.
You write the right checks, you get the right people there because that's ultimately the tools you have. You got lucky with the first ISOM campaign, so it opened up all these doors. Like, hey, I can write bigger checks to people and get the people I need. And just as you said, now you can work alongside industry titans. They can give you good critical advice on your writing,
Absolutely.
things that you can change on, whatever projects they are. That's the sort of thing I'm looking at. And quite honestly, Eric, this what you're doing is unprecedented. You're not seeing anybody else do this. You're laying the groundwork for what can happen, against the big two. All like indie creators aside, like you are an indie creator, but you're almost on the outside of that now because nobody's making comics in this way
No.
at this scale, this fast.
Right. Well, you're
Um,
100% correct on that. And look, I can't expect everybody to kind of understand that. I think it's going to fly over a lot of people's head. It's like what we are dealing with, volume and how the business is being run. And also, I would argue that one of the biggest things, a part of this, is like how we do our fulfillment. Like that's unprecedented in itself. Is instead of with us having a campaign as big as we had, even with like the competitive like campaign format stuff, those are all distributed by Diamond, by Penguin Random House, by the same methods that the mainstream guys that we're already using. So I'd argue even more so it's unique because of we're selling direct to customers at that volume. It's one thing to sell a couple of thousands of orders. We're talking quite literally tens of thousands of orders, hundreds of thousands of individual items that we're all accounting for. Everything's in house there. So yeah, it does come with a lot to consider that it's going to fly over a lot of people's heads. I recognize that pretty early. People are not just some people just won't ever understand it, and I don't expect the benefit of the doubt though. I think I owe that to I've been in the public sphere for a very long time, man, and when you are striking gold, you're going to get people that feel some kind of way about it. And they're going to voice it. There's no way around it. Whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whatever it may be. And I anticipate and I expect that. When you explode on the scene like we did, yeah, you're gonna get a lot of that. You're gonna get a lot of that. So I think the transparency element does help our company out a lot because we
yeah.
talk about a lot. I love to talk about business. I love to talk about what we're trying to do, the directions it is that we are going in. I do think that helps, especially our customers, kind of understand what it is that we're doing. But some folks ain't gonna ever understand it, and I will say this: I think this is where the independent scene starts to lose its independence, right? Because what does that term mean? To me, I take it literally. It's not about a one size fits all. It's not about me following. It's not about following rules. It's not about doing it a certain way. So sure, there are people that probably would, if they were in my position, would do things differently. Um, Fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Do it differently when you do it. That's not a problem at all. But that's the cool thing about independence is that we're figuring it out along the way. Things work, some things don't. And I think the transparency element just really does assist us. I would argue that we've gained so many people that want to support it because they're at the ground level and they're getting to see kind of into the company, which is a lot of that perspective that just isn't offered, at least to a company again of this scale.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I wanted to ask too, how, like considering your journey you know, from your background in music, social commentary to creating the Rippaverse, how do you think your diverse experiences in the public eye influence the storytelling and character development in your comics?
Oh, well, it influenced the business. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that. I learned a lot of what I know right now by navigating that. But as far as like the element of storytelling, you know, I've been a writer for so long. This isn't comics weren't necessarily the first sort of narrative driven stuff that I had ever wrote, especially gross writing for as long as I had been doing it. But yeah, a lot of that plays. Let me say this: the business. I don't look at it like two completely different things. Yes, they are different. Business and creative stuff, they're different. But I'd argue that they're intertwined, right? It's one depends on the other. And that's how I try to build this sort of company. So having understood what I do about business and like again playing a long game as we were talking about before,
Yeah.
that very much is a business oriented mind of thinking. But that also goes into the creative stuff as well, because we're telling stories based on how we assess the market and how our business is being run. And again, that comes from a lot of my experience with music and especially in the metal scene and navigating. There's so many similarities, especially with like the general culture. It can be a little catty, it be a little clicky.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we were dealing with in music. Is just blown up because this was more successful than. And though I was a very successful musician, Backwordz was huge, and we are returning, but with this it's just on a larger scale, so it's blown up, but it's the same stuff, right? So I think if anything, it prepared me to put me in a position with the business stuff, which lends itself to the creative things. I guess that would be how I word that.
Yeah. You're backward. What you're gonna? How do you? When did? Where? What time? Or did you find a way to bend space time to fit more in your schedule, man? Holy
Man,
crap!
when I say I work every day, I mean that. It is time is precious, man, and it's I'm never gonna be younger than I am today, and I recognize that. And I'm a workhorse. Like I legitimately have no problem, and it's easy to do that when you love what you do. If you love what you do, it almost doesn't feel like work. It can be very therapeutic. But yeah, I work. I work every day. There's not a whole lot of leisure time for me. Like especially since the launch of the Rippaverse, I don't game as much. I don't watch TV at all. I could tell you the last movie it is that I see. My
It's probably good
uh
though.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My let's say when I do want to kind of wind down, it's usually writing. You know what I mean? It's usually in some sort of creative element that I'm in. It's like doing something with work. So understanding that time is again such a precious resource, I take advantage of it, man. And that's the only reason why we're able to do what it is that we do and take advantage of what it is that we're able to take advantage of. And yeah, I gotta pick my spots. You know, I can't be every I'm not like the Saskas. I don't have a twin, right? So I gotta pick my spots, but being efficient with my time is very key to being able to do everything that I believe God put me on this earth to do with the talents it is that He's blessed me with. I do want to make sure I'm acting on those, and it just requires a lot of work. And yeah, a lot of things had to get dropped after the Rippaverse launch because of that. You know, it's because I had to allocate time to doing other things. But I never feel like I'm really working. Yeah, there's going to be tedious moments, but it can be very therapeutic.
I gotta say your cover of "Waiting for the End," which I'm guessing was a tribute
Mhm,
to Chester when he died,
mhm.
was I discovered your cover of that right after I discovered my friend had passed away very suddenly. And that song, like you're just how you guys performed that, like just it hit big and it was so well done.
Appreciate it.
Um, I'm
Thank you.
looking forward to the stuff you guys have coming out in the future because I don't know, man. There's just not enough like people making their own stuff. We made a whole sphere of complaining about shit, but there's not enough people doing that shit. You know, it's like, what's the
I
solution?
agree. I agree, man. Like I've talked about this before, and again, I appreciate those kind words, man. With and look, for me, there was a point in time as a window, 2019 and maybe 2021, where I was a YouTuber. Let's call it what it is, or content creator or whatever it is. That's what I was. That was my primary thing. And look, that makes sense for certain people. Gary talks about this all the time about how he couldn't do this. He couldn't do like what I do with like the business stuff and all that. But he's extremely good at what it is that he does.
Yeah.
And my calling, I believe, and I think again, God has shown me this by allowing me to be as successful as I have been. Not many people can say, not only have they charted on Billboard, right, with their music, while also then doing a comic book that made as much money as it is and doing it entirely independently. Both things that we did were entirely independent. We had a distributor for the Backwordz record, but it was owned by us, right? So to do all that stuff independently and see as much success as I've seen, that's my calling. My calling is to create. That's what I'm here to do. So that's what I do. And I hate that, YouTube is, look, man, it can be a little addictive, man. I hate that there are folks that are out there that have these incredible talents that fall into this trap of to your point, the commentary stuff. There's a whole lot of people doing that, and they're very talented. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do it from time to time, but is better suited for the guys that have the talent, for the guys that are creative. Your time is going to be better being allocated to that creativity shit as opposed to the commentary stuff. This is what I had to learn very quickly, man. And this is why, hey, for Kenne's sake, it was on hiatus for a year and some change. Then I brought it back, and it's only one time a week, right? I stream 3 times a week. It's Ripper the Silverback, it's For Kenne's Sake, it's Tuesday Night's Main Event. And then for our YouTube, we're creating content out of basically those 3 things it is that we've done, so I can spend the rest of the time creating, because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what it's meant for me. And going in that time sink is not what's needed. And I don't like that there are so many creative people that fall into that trap of like, hey, commentary and not enough creating. Like we need creatives out there. We need great people doing great things. If that's your calling, if you got that talent, use it, man. Use it.
There's one more question I want to ask. I want to get there's a couple super chats that came in. But this one, how do you respond to the critics who say that the Rippaverse is a direct reaction against the perceived political correctness in mainstream comic book culture, and how do you balance your personal political beliefs with storytelling in the Rippaverse?
Well, to them, I would tell them, read our books. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. For people that don't know what that is, it's the furthest of basically a libertarian can be, right? Whereas to minarchists would make an exception for security, national security, court systems. The anarcho-capitalist says privatize it all.
Okay.
And the second book it is that we come out with is what? A bunch of superhero cops.
Yeah. Yep. Right.
That I created, by the way. Chuck Dixon wrote it for sure, and that's his story. He deserves the credit for all of that. But I created Alpha Core. That came out of my head as far as the concept, the general concept of those guys. And that's in itself shows that that's not how we do things. So maybe if you want to believe that, and I think it's comforting for some people to believe that, well, that's the only reason why they're doing, like, okay, go read our books. Go read our books. You'll see there's ain't none of that stuff there, because we leave it at the door. If this is gonna last test, I think people also need to understand what a libertarian even is, right? Especially what it is that I like. My goal is to rid the world of politics altogether. Like if I had it my way, okay. So for me, if there's anything that the political stuff drives, it's that I'm trying to give people an outlet so they don't have to worry about that shit and not have to always be thinking about it. So credit the philosophy for that element. But as far as beating the audience over the head with that, no, Everybody leaves that stuff at the door. You think we got a bunch of anarcho-capitalists that work? I don't think. I think outside of Alex, that's it. I think he's the only ANCAP that works for the company. Everybody else is, hell, Lord knows what. My requirement is just don't be a hack. I don't care what side of the political spectrum that you're on, because that's not what it is that we're attempting to do. Now, that may be what others do. Maybe start creating to spite their ideological enemies. But then I'd be a hypocrite if I did that, because that's what I talk about the mainstream doing. Right. So I'll never do that. If other people want to do that, that's their business. You want to do parodies in that aspect, fine. But that's not my thing, and it'll never be my thing. I just want to get out there and build a legitimate publisher, be a legitimate publisher in a legitimate media company. And I need this sandbox to be fun for everybody that's involved. I want a fun fandom. I want a healthy one. And in order to do that, I can't be leading with social bullcrap or political bullcrap. I just can't be doing that.
You know, I saw the Sasko sisters in chat. Hail to you, ladies, for showing. I appreciate you. But they had said, you know, just like Hollywood, the bigger you get, the more criticism you draw. And I think that's probably something else that probably hit in your brain once you saw that campaign climb over 3 million in ISOM 1, is that, oh shit, like, we got to be ready, because not only are people going to be putting us under a microscope, you know, with the money that's being brought in, they're going to have criticism after criticism, and this is wrong and that's wrong. And so it's
anticipated, right? That's how you got to be. I roll with it. It's like, look, once you became what people deem as the top dog, you got a target on your back. So there's going to be, for some people, nothing you do is right. Everything you do is wrong. And they're going to comb through everything with a fine tooth comb. Like, bro, I've been a fan of comic books almost my entire life.
Yeah.
Never once do I remember having conversations about a truck in the background of any comic book. Well, those are the type of conversations that happen dealing with the Rippaverse, because of the position it is that we're in. They're going to comb through everything, and it's something that we welcome. Me and the internal team were talking about this. That really just legitimizes us and solidifies our place in this industry, that people worry about us to that degree.
Yeah, and it seems to me that, like, people just, I think one of the other issues that we're running into, and it's something that it's going to take a long time for people to figure out, is how do we compartmentalize and parse all this data that we're putting in our brains at any given moment. We're communicating at unprecedented levels. Like, people think it's normal to, like, sit and stew about the Rippaverse all day. They think it's normal to make an account that only calls out Rippaverse. They think that's a normal thing, and it's healthy for their brain. When you and I know that there was a time before all this where you didn't sit online all day. You waited 15 minutes for a JPEG to download, and you got shit done during that time. And
so true.
Right? Like, we know what that life is like. And so many of the people who I think are, like, bothering you incessantly are just people who grew up way past that, and they think everything's owed to them, that everything that they say is meaningful and should be useful. And I think how you have dealt with people over the time, like, it might not be how I would have done it or how I do it, but it works. People find your company and your brand to be authentic. It's one thing that keeps me coming back, is that you put out what you say you're going to put out. You deliver what you say you're going to deliver. The minute that stops, I'll reconsider where my money goes.
Sure.
Right? Like,
sure.
like any, right. So I just want to thank you for the hard work that you continue to put into your company, to your employees, and putting out good stories. I'm looking forward to everything that's coming out, man.
Appreciate you, man.
Got a couple super chats here that we're going to get to. MSK Content Entertainment for $2 says, ISOM and Yara book called Interracial Number 1.
That's probably not happening.
Probably not. Harry Toe number 1 for $10. Thank you, sir. says, "Hey, Eric July, what advice would you ask from Stan Lee if you could?" Good
Ooh,
question.
that's such a difficult question. The artist of ISOM met Stan Lee. There's a picture of them together actually. If you want to check that out. But yeah, man, that's so difficult, man. I because I want to ask him everything. You know what I mean? Just really his approach to telling to storytelling, man, would more so be what I would pick his brain on. So nothing in particular. I just want to know his process. I know we've seen things how to do this the Marvel way, but I really want to know how to do Stan Lee way. Just what went through his brain, the actual process, right, of storytelling, because he created so many characters alongside his artist, and I would just want to, just from a businessman and from a creative standpoint, I would want to know what that is. Because look, maybe it doesn't work for me, maybe it doesn't make sense for me, but maybe it is something that he does that could elevate me, and I'm sure it could. It's Stan Lee, that could elevate me as a creative. That could be implemented in my process of storytelling. So that would for sure be, wouldn't be anything generally specific. It would just be, I want to know your process, man. I want to know it top to bottom.
Nice. 4.99 from Vets Talking. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you, brother. Rippa, looking forward to meeting you in Orlando. Never been a comic book guy, but I love the Rippaverse, and I'd be so happy if you'll sign my ISO #1.
Oh, dude, that's what I'm gonna be there for. So I will sign whatever it is, and I do not charge. Some would have to, I'd have to probably have another, I don't know, $30 million campaign before I ever start charging for like in-person signatures. So if you're in person and we're at an event, that's what I'm there to do. I'll sign as many items as you need me to sign, man. That's what it's about.
Nice. I wish I was able to make MegaCon as soon as Gina had announced that she was going. I looked at who was there, and I was like, "Holy shit, this thing is stacked."
It's
And then
massive, man.
yeah, and then G and Nerdrotic were like, "We're going." I'm
Critical
like just
drinker.
yeah, yeah, and Drinker. And I was like, "Man, I just don't have." It was just down to the wire. It was
Yeah.
too short. But I'll be in Vegas. So, are you planning on going to Vegas for
Vegas, I don't know. We'll see. I would love to do that. I haven't got there yet, so I would love to do that.
Cool. We got $5 from Sheep City, and I think you know this guy. Eric made me donate to my co-host just to say that I've been ANCAP
Yeah,
for
that's
years
true.
now.
Yeah, that's true.
I've always
I
hated
forgot.
the government,
My bad.
even when I joined the military.
That's on me. My bad. So there's three of us. That's three of us. So yeah.
Thank you, Sheep. Appreciate you, brother. And I think this last one's from a detractor, but I'm supposed to read because I got in a lot of trouble last time I didn't read a super chat. Michael Winning for $5 says the fear and challenge is understandable. Could you imagine how worse they'd be though if you had to actually write and draw the comic yourself? So yeah, sounds like a
I
detractor.
don't even understand what it is that he's trying to say here. Could you
This
imagine
was
how much worse they'd be though if you had to actually write and draw the comic? I don't understand what he's saying.
I think it was relating back to one of your I'd asked about what your fears were
Yeah.
for making the comic
Yeah.
early. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know.
But thanks for the $5. Appreciate you,
Appreciate
man.
appreciate
Um,
you.
anyways, that's gonna do it for us. We're gonna do a quick little segment for our locals only subscribers. After this, I want to thank Eric July again for joining me today. Thanks, brother. I really appreciate you.
Shout
Um,
out.
the chat, the Saskas, every single person who has been here tonight, the mods. I really appreciate you guys. You just keep the show rolling. Um, we have a couple other shows left in January, so make sure you stay tuned. I've sitting down with a friend on Thursday, and then on next Monday, a week from today, we're sitting down with Comics Division to talk with him. So
Shout
stay
out.
tuned. We got another couple great episodes before we close out January of 2024. We'll see everyone later. Ripper, you got anything coming up you want to tell anyone about?
Oh man, you just mentioned it. We'll be at MegaCon, so
Okay,
come holla at us there, man. I appreciate you having me on, man. It's always good to chat about this stuff.
cool. All right, dude. We'll see everyone later. We'll check you next time. See ya.